Hello everyone, my name is Ferris Biscuit and this is the United Hearthstone League Weekly Recap number 1. We have a whole bunch to go over this week, so let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Taking a look at the Week 1 matches, we have CM Plummer and Spiver of the 1600 Dust podcast going head-to-head in the first ever 1600 Dust Bowl. From there, we have Ridiculous Hat of the Coin Cassie podcast taking on Versika of the Hero Power podcast. And then from there, we have Siggy Azera representing the 1600 Dust podcast taking on Andrew Brown of the Happy Hearthstone podcast. And then finally, we wrap up the week with Ben Reddington of the Dad Legend community taking on Rod Johnston of the Tier 5 podcast. The first match of the week saw Ben Reddington of the Dad Legend community taking on Rod Johnston of the Tier 5 podcast. Ben will be bringing his Rogue, Mage, and Druid classes, while Rod opted to go with Rogue, Druid, and Warrior.
With the lineups being brought here, it would be interesting to see exactly how the Warrior for Rod would work out in this case, as well as to see how well each player's Druid does. We also have a little bit unknown of Mage at the moment, so let's go ahead and see how these classes fared out for them.
Rod will come out to a nice start, taking a win with his Warrior class over Ben's Druid. From there, looking to match 2, Ben would bounce back, taking a win in the Druid Mirror match. And then to Game 3, he would take yet another win, taking Game 3 with his Rogue over Rod's Druid. And then Game 4, we saw a bounce back by Rod with his Rogue, taking on Ben's Mage. And then the final decisive matchup, we saw Ben take it home with his Mage over Rod's Druid. Our second matchup of the week saw Ridiculous Hat of the Coin Cassie podcast bringing his Rogue, Shaman, and Warrior classes, taking on Versika of the Hero Power podcast with his Shaman, Priest, and Druid classes.
In this matchup, we got our first match, which would be a slew of matches containing Shaman throughout the week. We also got a promise from Versika that he would be bringing things that weren't normally found in such meta decks, and we also got a chance to see how Hat would fare with Warrior. So let's go ahead and see how these matches played out for these two.
This matchup would see Versika coming out with a strong 2-0 start within the first game, taking his Druid class against Hat's Warrior, and in the second game taking his Priest class against Hat's Shaman. From there, however, it would be all Hat, and Hat it was, as he completed the reverse sweep, taking Game 3 with his Warrior class over Versika's Shaman. In Game 4, he took Rogue against Versika's Shaman, and then finally in the Shaman Mirror match, he was able to eke out a win as well. Our third matchup of the week was none other than the first ever 1600 Dust Bowl between CM Plummer and Spiver. CM Plummer would be bringing his Warrior, Shaman, and Hunter classes, while Spiver opted for Shaman, Mage, and Paladin.
We knew that these two would be putting on a spectacle, seeing how they were going after each other all week throughout social media, and even started the Smack Talk on their previous episode of 1600 Dust. So let's go ahead and see how the 1600 Dust Bowl turned out.
Getting into the breakdown of the matches, we saw Spivey take match 1 with his Paladin class over Chris's Hunter class. Going into Game 2, we saw another Shaman Mirror matchup for the week in which Chris was able to take home the victory there. From there, Spivey bounced back with his Shaman class, taking out Chris's Warrior. And then to wrap it up for Game 4, Spivey would ultimately take the match with his Mage over Chris's Warrior to claim the first ever 1600 Dust Bowl title. Our last matchup of the week would see Ziggy Sarah of the 1600 Dust podcast taking on Andrew is Living of the Happy Hearthstone. Ziggy would be bringing her Priest, Shaman, and Hunter lineup, while Andrew was going to go with his Shaman, Rogue, and Mage lineup.
For this matchup, I feel like both players took a strategy of bringing some of the better meta decks, with Ziggy bringing Priest and Andrew bringing Rogue, and they sprinkled in perhaps some of the weaker classes as of now, with Ziggy bringing both Hunter and Shaman, while Andrew opted to go with Shaman, and a more unknown class, as we already said, in Mage. So let's see how it worked out for these two.
This matchup would ultimately turn out to be arguably one of the best matches of the week, starting off with Ziggy on Priest taking out Andrew's Rogue. However, Andrew would bounce back with his Rogue class against Ziggy's Shaman to tie it up at 1 apiece. From there, we saw Ziggy take out Andrew's Mage with her Hunter to take a 2-1 lead going into Game 4, in which, yet again, Andrew would bounce back with his Mage and take out Ziggy's Shaman, leading to ultimately a Shaman vs. Shaman mirror matchup to decide the winner. And if you haven't seen this one, please go check it out, because it was one for the ages, and Ziggy was ultimately able to pull it out and take a 3-2 victory in Week 1. Taking a look at the standings after Week 1, we see Spiver sitting atop in first place because he only had one game won against him, and then we have a tie for the last 3 remaining playoff spots between Ridiculous Hat, Ben Reddington, and Ziggy Zera. And then from there, we had the bottom 4 so far after Week 1, again at a tie between Andrew is Living, Rod Johnston, and Versika, all at 0-1, and CM Plummer pulling up the pack, currently in 8th place due to only having won one game in his first match at 0-1. Obviously, it's very early in the season, and these standings are more than likely going to change throughout, so we'll see how this ends up working out. Looking at the class selection breakdown for this week, we see some noticeable trends as Shaman is brought 6 times, leading the pack, which is surprising. However, I guess that's some of the strategy being played out here between the players as far as some of the classes they may want to get out of the way. And then another interesting note is that Warrior was bought 3 times, tying it for 3rd for this week. And as we can clearly see here, Warlock was not brought at all, so you can probably expect some Q-Block variants in the future. Now that we've seen the class breakdown, let's see how the classes did overall for this week. As we mentioned before, Shaman was brought the most time, however, only saw a 33% win percentage this week, going 4-8. Yes, there were quite a few mirrors in there, but not looking too well overall. As you can clearly tell, we have Priest sitting atop here at 100%, as well as with Paladin, followed by Rogue. And another noticeable trend is Druid, only saw a 2-4 record, finishing the week off at 33% as well.
Week 2, we have some awesome games coming up for you, including CM Plummer taking on Ziggy Zera. We have Ben Reddington taking on Spiver. We have Ridiculous Hat taking on Andrew. And our final match of the week will be Versika taking on Rod Johnston. I also want to take this time to introduce something that we've gotten feedback from the community on in regards to getting you guys a little bit more engaged. So I'm happy to announce the weekly pick'em game. You can find all the information at UnitedHearthstoneLeague.com as far as how this is going to work, but essentially what it's going to be is you're going to give a little bit of information about you, such as your email and your Battle.net ID. That way we can track it better. And then from there, you're going to go ahead and pick who you think is going to win the matches for the week. You have until the end of Monday to do so, or if there is, for whatever reason, a match scheduled on Monday, you have until that match starts in order to submit your picks. The winner will be chosen each week on the weekly recap, and from there, if you are chosen and do win, you do get 2 free packs. And again, we will be doing this each week leading up to the playoffs, so make sure you stick around and follow along to see if you are a winner or not. I want to close this week with just giving my sincere thank you to everyone who has made the United Hearthstone League up to this point what it is. In all honesty, I knew, starting out, I wanted to create some kind of league. I had absolutely no idea how big this would get in just the short amount of time that we've been around. And for that, I just say thank you. I'm looking forward to showing you even more that we have to offer. And by adding such things as weekly pick'em, just getting everybody involved is it's an awesome thing that I love to see happen with this game and its community. As always, if you have any feedback, you can gladly reach us at UnitedHearthstoneLeague@gmail.com and gladly follow us along on Twitter at UnitedHSLeague. That's it for this week's recap. I'm Ferris Biscuit, and thank you very much for watching.